You're listening to Thriving in Business and Life. This is Will Wilkinson.
And this is Christopher Harding. And as our listeners know, a lot of times we do an impossible challenge during the course of the show.
We love that. We love facing the impossible and doing it from the comfort of our armchairs.
That's right. And today in our episode, I'm going to do the impossible challenge up front. I'm going to see if I can summarize the last 8 weeks of our episodes in a real short period of time and actually make sense.
Well, there's a reason Cliff Notes are popular. This is kind of the Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes, because retention is all important. Information can have value, but only when we can integrate it and apply it for improvements in our life. And that's why we do this.
Yeah, and part of the logic of how we put our book together was that we tried to have things that build upon each other. And we're heading into a series of chapters that are really kind of your specialty on visioning. And so we want to kind of like set the context up for this because all of this is under the umbrella of what does it take to thrive? What does it take to create a thriving culture around us?
Mm-hmm. Well, and as we say often in the book, when we use the term thriving, we're referencing the most obvious example there is, which is nature.
Right, yeah.
And there's something effortless about the way nature thrives. Most of us have seen the picture of a weed making its way through asphalt. That's thriving.
Yeah, truly. And you think about nature, and as human beings, we seem to have, as far as we know anyway, some characteristics that the rest of nature doesn't as obviously possess if it has it. And the first one was in our first episodes. We talked about the power of story, that as human beings, we have this ability to make up stories about things, that nature abhors a vacuum, and apparently so does our mind, because it tends to fill in the blanks with meaning. A fact happens, something takes place, and we make it mean something. And the challenge is we often confuse the meaning we impose on the facts as the truth. Mm-hmm. And so that can get tricky.
Well, of course, because all of us interpret the facts differently. You're telling different stories about things than I am, and so is everybody else. Right.
And as long as we know that and start to get clear on the fact, okay, what's the story I'm making up in this moment? What am I making? What happened? What am I making that mean? And where's that going to lead me? It's kind of like following the bouncing ball, right?
Right. You're reminding me of a seminar I attended years ago where the presenter talked about this. His term for it was, he would say, when he was kind of commenting on what he saw going on, he would say, my hallucination is...
Yeah, well, I kind of like that because it just kind of calls it out, doesn't it?
Right.
my hallucination of what's happening is... Yeah.
And I love that because it was, funny, but actually it's pretty true.
Wow,
we're seeing... I mean, I wear contact lenses, and I notice whenever I put my glasses on instead, if there's a smudge on that lens, what I'm looking at seems to have a smudge on it. I understand It's on my lens. But this is what you're getting at with the whole difference between the way things are and the stories we make up about them. We're wearing a lens of a particular magnification or style that determines what we think is really going on. It's our story about it.
Right, and then we talked also about how biases, the virus of bias as we call it, can infect our storytelling, so that now societal biases creep into our meaning. They creep into the story we impose and the story we make up about other people, so that now our lens has even yet another layer to it that we're often very unconscious of. And so what happens is we start to limit the possibilities of what we think can be done, what we think our options are. We start to impose, a lot of times motives on other people that may have nothing to do with where they are really coming from.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the limitations, and then on the other side of the coin, there's the excesses. Where our biases swing us. I was remembering Steve Jobs apparently had a very strong, what they call reality warp field. Which meant that when you were near him, you started to think the way he thought. Oh, I need a Mac. I need this. I'm going to invent that. And all of us carry a field that impacts other people, whether we call it bias or preferences, whatever. Others feel it, and they will tend to get entrained to our values. And that's okay if our values are honorable and if they include letting other people have their own. But this is what dictators do when they impose their biases on others.
Right, and we've talked about how our brain has a part called the reticular activating system that once we can create a reality for ourselves, it starts to interpret our experience, searching to verify that reality. So it's looking for evidence that we're right.
Yeah, when you think you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about the halo effect, how sometimes we won't see other people's faults because we're so enamored with who they are, we have a positive bias on them. That is actually impacting our thinking as well.
I love the way you described that in the book, and I think in the episode, the halo effect being cutting people a break they may not really deserve.
Right.
You know, like for instance, a behavior that's inappropriate and it's consistent.
Yeah.
And yet, if the halo effect is in operation, we may forgive that person, say, well, they're just having an off day. No, they're having an off life. And it's infecting our organization.
Yeah, their character needs an adjustment, you know. Well, and lastly, leading into the vision piece, we talked about values. And we take a little bit different approach to it, that values, rather than being what somebody tells us we should have, we suggest that our values really should be based on what lights us up. What are we passionate about? What brings us to life the most? And then, rather than allowing circumstances to dictate whether we live our values or not, to really take ownership for infusing every moment we can with those values, to bring those values into everything we do.
Well, I know, Chris, that both of us were really blessed with parents who helped instill good values in us. I understand from what you've told me about your mom and dad, and I've said a bit about mine, they didn't impose their values, but they definitely helped us become aware of our own. And that's just invaluable. And some weren't as fortunate as us. And in organizations, leaders have a responsibility to kind of do the same.
Well, and you've brought this up before, that when an organization espouses certain values and then pretends to live them, you know, they put them up on the wall, they're on a wallet card. The
pseudopodic ego.
The pseudopodic ego.
You know, you like that, and I like your phrase, reticulation system.
A reticular activating system.
There you go. I can't even say it. So we each have one big word.
Yeah, we pull that out at parties on occasion.
Exactly. Not a good pickup line.
No. You know, it's that pseudopodic ego. I got so curious, I looked it up, and it was that thing, pseudo being false, that it's the ego attempting or pretending to have or possess something that it actually doesn't have.
Right.
And that companies, leaders, any of us have to be careful that when we're espousing a certain value, that it's authentic and that it's lived as opposed to so merely spoken.
Well, and there's a special challenge for any of us who do presenting to other people. We tend to tell stories. Over time, those stories can change.
Right.
The fish gets a lot bigger years later. So I think it's important, if we're really being honorable about our impact in the world, to take that into account and regularly kind of stop ourselves and say, wait a minute, is this really true, or am I elaborating on the story?
Yeah, to make a point.
To make a point we may think is really important, and maybe it is, but honesty is also important too.
There have been some very famous public speakers who, after years of telling stories that had, I guess, grown as well, were eventually outed that either the story was patently untrue, was about someone else, or was far smaller than they had made it out to be. And, we can look at somebody like that and go, oh, what a shame. And yet, the studies that we reference in the book from the Massachusetts study was that basically all of us tend to exaggerate. All of us tend to alter the truth to fit the situation. That's goes back to that storytelling piece. So, yeah, great reminder.
Well, there was a character on Saturday Night Live who had a great routine about that.
Right.
I forget his name now.
John Lovitz.
John Lovitz. Yeah. And he'd say, yeah, I'm a world-class chef. Yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. It's hilarious. And you knew he was making it all up. But it made a really good point that we all tend to do that in subtler ways.
Right. Yeah. That was a classic routine. Well, as we look at all of this and think about it in the context of, if we're looking at thriving, then what are the stories or the meaning, you could say, we want to impose on today and in our situations, how can we watch our biases to make sure they're not infecting those stories? And what are the values we want to infuse into our day in order to not only thrive ourselves, but as you said, to emanate thriving, to enhance the chances that, as the Heart Math Institute has studied, we actually have the ability to impact other people's energy fields, heart rates, brain waves, and so on. So with that in mind, and now we start to move into, okay, we have that ability and challenges. So visioning, this is something you coach people on a lot. And, I've done visioning with corporations. I've done it in a variety of settings, but this is a real specialty area for you. As you think about vision and thriving, how do those two things relate in your mind?
Well, as you were just going over this last bit, I was thinking about motivation and just putting myself in the listener's shoes. And you did a great job of kind of listing these important things. And I had the thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that. Why would I do that? And
right.
I think that's very common, that we get an idea of something that would be good to do, but we're not motivated to do it, especially to make a change. So that's the frame that I see visioning in. For a lot of people, visioning is something kind of passive. You think about what you would like. I'd like to make $1 million. I'd like to have a great partnership. I'd like to feel as good as I did when I was 20 again.
More like a dream.
It's a dream, and I think dreaming is wonderful, but, as they say, a goal is a dream with a deadline. So in other words, you get specific. So in the visioning work I do with people, it's helping them use their imagination to make a outcome very tangible enough to motivate them. The question all of us can ask is, what gets us out of bed in the morning? Especially on a dark, dreary, wet day. We may wake up and we're really aware of all the stuff we've got to do. Maybe some of it we don't want to do.
Yeah, some sense of drudgery.
A Groundhog Day. Oh God, here we go again.
Yeah.
My experience, in my own life and also with clients over years, is that vision, a properly embodied vision, can really provide the motivation to get us going, no matter what the circumstance is. I wrote and published 3 books last year, one of them with you. It seems like a big accomplishment. I guess it is. But I don't have a memory of it being a real struggle. I remember waking up at 5 a.m. in Mexico in February and starting on my one book, Now or Never. And I was so excited to get out of bed.
So you were saying the vision, it was really pulling you.
The vision was pulling me towards an outcome that was so attractive. It was much more attractive than laying in a warm, cozy bed.
Now, for some people, they could be listening to this and going, yeah, well, that's great, but how about me? I'm not sure I even know what my vision is. I have my life and I have my day-to-day, and how do I move from mundane into something that's compelling enough or passionate enough or exciting enough to where it actually pulls me? Because most of the time I feel like I'm pushing life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. It identifies a meme, I guess it is. Be pulled by a vision instead of pushing towards a goal. And when I diagram that, sometimes I put a little stick figure pushing a big boulder up a hill.
Yeah.
It gets harder and harder. On the other hand, if you reverse that and go downhill, pulled by something, things get easier and easier. Mentioning this book, as I kept going with it, the writing got easier and easier. That's not usually the case. Usually it gets harder and harder. So that's a good way to tell if we're being pulled by a vision that really compels us, or if we're pushing towards a goal we want to accomplish.
So sometimes when I'm coaching people in, let's say, a company setting, an organizational setting, and they're kind of feel a little bit stuck. And so this is where the values piece comes in, and how it connects to vision in my mind, is that I start to ask them, well, what is it that lights you up? What do you love to do?
Right.
And they say, well, I really love to collaborate with people. Yeah. That'd be one example. And it'd be like, well, so what have you got on your schedule today? Well, I've got this meeting, it's the same meeting we have every week. Okay, hang on a second. What if you went into that meeting with this kind of almost crazy commitment
Yeah.
that you were going to see if you could get even one little moment of collaboration happening in that meeting.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. I mean, you have to get a little sometimes daring, I guess you could say. But what seems to happen, and I've heard you say this before, that a vision doesn't have to be way out in the future. It doesn't have to be something grand. The vision could be about that meeting.
Exactly. I think you put that really well. One of our challenges in even daring to use the word vision is to redefine it. Because it can seem, especially from work we may have done in a boardroom or in our own personal lives, writing out a vision, it may seem intimidating, even the word itself.
Unattainable.
Unattainable. It's way out there. And sadly, a lot of visions become that. They're written up and then filed away. And then we get into a lot of self-judgment because we're not achieving this grand vision. Anybody who's succeeded in achieving something big will tell you 95% of it is hard work, one step after another. Now, the visionary, kind of exciting entrepreneurial moment gets our attention, but then the second act shows up in our storytelling, and we need to do the work. The example I use that seems to help us understand vision is driving. It's important to keep our eyes open while we're driving.
You think?
It's also important to look through the windshield.
Right.
And why is that important? Because it's important to know where we're going.
Well, yeah.
Now, it seems silly, but imagine driving with your eyes glued to the rearview mirror.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd have an accident. Why? Because important as a rearview mirror is, it's good to glance at it, that's not where you want to be looking all the time. You look through the windshield to know where you're going so you can be prepared for it. Now, a lot of people, unfortunately, live their lives as if they're looking in the rearview mirror most of the time. They're lamenting how they failed before. They're acting today based on precedents from yesterday and then complaining about being trapped. Well, I don't want to be dismissive or disrespectful, but my suggestion is look forward. Look into the future. The other part of using this analogy is we all know when we're driving and we're looking forward, we're changing our where we look all the time.
Right.
Sometimes it's very close, sometimes it's farther afield. That's another part of true visioning, is that it's very elastic. It telescopes in and out. Sometimes we may look 5 years down the road, say, where do I want to be in 5 years if we're considering our careers? Other times we're looking very close up. What is this person saying to me? What did that look mean? So visioning really is about seeing clearly.
Well, and you use an example in the book that I thought was great, is if you put an elastic band, a rubber band, around your thumb and your index finger, and you pull them apart, after a while, something's going to give. Either your thumb is going to move towards your index finger, or your index finger is going to move towards your thumb. And you use that as an analogy about visioning.
Well,
explain that.
Let's give credit where it's due here. Robert Fritz originated this model, which he calls structural tension, in his book, The Path of Least Resistance. I hardly recommend that book. His point is that there's always the way things are, and then our vision of what we'd like them to be. For most people, the vision isn't nearly as strong as their experience of the way things are. So the forefinger and the thumb represent the vision and the way things are. Now that elastic band, that's tension. You can't hold it forever. So one of them is going to move towards the other. If we are stronger in our vision, we're really clear about our values, we're looking forward, we're going somewhere in our life, the way things are will tend to move towards that vision, and the vision will become reality. If, on the other hand, we only have like a wish, a daydream, I wish I had more money, I wish I lived in a better house. But meanwhile, 90% of our attention is on micromanaging the way things are. That vision is going to collapse into things as they are, and we'll go, my New Year's resolution didn't pan out again. I failed once again. Why does this always happen to me? Well, the answer is clear. because you're not as strong in your vision as you are in your addressing the way things are.
Well, and that goes back to the power of story too, right? And how these things really fold in on each other. So if I'm really wed to my story that, my situation isn't fair, or my job is boring, or people don't like to collaborate, whatever it might be, then what happens is I start looking for evidence that affirms the way I think things are.
Exactly.
And what we're really suggesting with visioning is that if I cast a vision, if I imagine, like you said, and imagining is an important part of it, and we'll get into this more in just a minute, but if I imagine, let's make it simple, about that meeting I was talking about with one of my clients. Imagine you in that meeting. And imagine the way it starts to feel when you start to collaborate and you see somebody else's eyes light up. And what you guide people through, I know in your own process, is to really get clear on what that feels like and to feel that feeling now, so that they go into the room presencing, if you will, that feeling. So they're actually going to use their brain's reticular activating system to seek for that evidence, as opposed to the evidence of the way things have been.
You put it so well. I mean, it's really asking a very simple question. What if? I call that a consciousness can opener. It opens up a world of possibilities. And I suggest our listeners practice this in any situation, especially circumstances that seem really onerous, burdensome, kind of inevitable, and we notice we're resigned to something. We can make a correction. We can stop and say to ourselves, what if? What if this could be different? What if this person who's usually impossible to work with, what if I enjoyed working with them today? What if this locked-in situation that I think is never going to change, what if it could begin to shift? We've talked before, I believe, about the observer effect, which is a reality in the quantum world. I invite our listeners to try this out. Next time you're in a situation that seems really intractable, that is just stuck in molasses, ask the question, what if? And then take responsibility for providing something new in that situation, even if it's just seeing it differently. That's what visioning is.
Well, and you've described this before, and we talk about this in these earlier chapters of the book, that what-if scenario can play out particularly well if I say, what if this was possible, or this were possible? Who would I have to be in order to help that along, or facilitate that, or bring that about? And then, like you say, I start to take responsibility for me showing up differently to help bring that vision into reality.
I want to make another distinction here relative to vision. It's not about having a vision of how things are going to turn out and then magically creating them exactly that way.
Right.
And this is, I think, a fault of a lot of the intention setting procedures and so forth. Then people get very disappointed. Because things didn't turn out the way they visioned them to be. You mentioned the secret a moment ago. It's feeling. You vision, the outcome you would like, but then you get in touch with how it would feel. Because when a person says, well, I want more money. Well, money is useless, except when you use it for something. They don't really want the money. Just having money sitting on the counter may give them a sense of security, but it's just paper, or it's just entries on a screen. What they want is what they can do with the money. But they don't even want that. They want the feeling that those things will give them. So they say, I really need a vacation. I want to go to Greece. Well, Greece is nice, but why do you want to go to Greece? Well, I want to see new things. I want to get out of my job. I want to enjoy myself. There you go. They want to have fun. So the vision is around the thing, yes, but the thing that provides a certain feeling. So then the person can say, well, okay, why don't I start feeling that way right now? Start bringing that into every day rather than some future destination that may or may not happen. Exactly. I think the term I use it a lot with clients, and I believe we have it in the book, is vision first, results now. It's actually very profound, because you don't have to wait for the results. We'll get results, and hopefully there'll be something along the lines of what we visioned, but it doesn't need to be disappointing. And it's not letting ourselves off the hook to be underachievers. We want to strive to accomplish as much as we want to. However, when we bring this particular kind of visioning into it, we actually begin to live in satisfaction and appreciation and gratitude even when things don't turn out the way we wanted them to. And I'll tell you, that makes a big difference in improving our abilities to create what we want.
Well, yeah, we realize we're a participant in the play, and there are other participants as well. There are other factors. There was a story, I think it was you that told me this with one of your clients, about a woman who wanted to lose weight, and that the idea was to get her feeling, what would it feel like if you had lost weight? How would you feel about yourself? Imagine what that feels like. And she started to feel it, and she started to really experience herself differently. And like, well, so how would you dress? What would you wear? And she actually went out and bought herself a different dress and got dressed up and went out and had 2 men ask her out on dates that day. I mean, nothing had changed. She hadn't lost any weight that day, but what she was emanating and the way she felt about herself was creating the experience of what she hoped to have by losing weight.
Yeah, it is really amazing. When we get this, it's a bit of a secret. When we get it, our lives turn upside down. I mean, I remember Henry Ford said, whether you believe it's true or not, you're right.
Yeah, that's the Richard Bach's argue for limitations, and they're yours.
Yeah, right? I mean, what is my vision about my life? Am I visioning a life of joy and happiness, friendship, love, success? Or am I kind of giving up? And there's a strong tendency to give up when circumstances are challenging. But the question is, what am I doing about it?
Yeah.
It's not about ignoring our dark feelings. I regularly entertain mine. I welcome despair when it shows up, but I don't stick my head in an oven.
Well, and I think part of that is you've learned that those kind of feelings are there to, you could say, give us messages to let us know, hey, something's amiss, something's not right, something's off course. And to be able to really listen to what's the message this is saying. Yeah. And if we also realize that, gratefully, we have this amazing ability to change our circumstances, to infuse our circumstances with different values, with different vision. And so, feeling despair can sometimes have me say, wow, maybe what I need to do today, I've been feeling this despair, is to go out and look for one thing that's hopeful. Go out and look for one thing that's beautiful. And when I see it, relish that beauty.
Exactly. All of us are going to encounter both dark and light. The question is, what are we committed to? If we have a vision to enjoy our lives, to make the most of them, to share as much with our friends as we can, to leave some kind of legacy of value, then we'll take it all in stride. But remembering those 2 poles, the forefinger and the thumb, which is going to win out? Is it our loyalty to a vision, moving forward into the future, or is it getting stuck in the intractable situations that can wear us out if that's all that's going on?
We love to kind of finish up our episodes with a sense of, what would be the difference between surviving and thriving. And part of it, and we'll get into this more next week, of not knowing what you want. That's surviving. I don't know what I want. I know what I don't want. And we hear that a lot, you and I both, in our coaching. Thriving is starting to get crystal clear about what you want.
This is the real message of thriving, that it's already in us. It's innate. If we're alive, we're innately thriving. And so I hope listeners are really getting how empowered we already are. We can make a choice. We can make a correction. We can learn from everything that happens, but make a commitment to a vision for a wonderful life.
Yeah, I'd really invite our listeners just to use visioning in small ways. Easy ways. Yeah. What do you want to happen in the next half day, or in a meeting, or in a coffee break with someone?
Exactly. Thank you. That's the best suggestion. Small steps.
Yeah,
small steps. What's my vision for this afternoon?
That's right.
Well, again, this has been a real pleasure. You've been listening to Thriving in Business and in Life. My name is Will Wilkinson.
And I'm Christopher Harding, and you can reach out to us with stories or comments at thrivinginbusinessandlife@gmail.com.